Alright, place your 18mm wrench on your lower tie rod end nut, and then you can double wrench it with that 17mm I was talking about. Now as you pull this towards you, don't slip off, because if you slip off either way, you can hurt yourself. So just grab it and pull like that. Now you can remove it. And here's that optional tool I was telling you about. This is an 18mm combination wrench ratchet. And it makes things pretty easy. So just remove that nut most of the way. Oh, just a little side note here. Notice that it's moving fairly well, you know, it turned counterclockwise. But if you get one where the shaft turns, you'll notice that some of them either have an Allen wrench hole or they'll have basically a nut built into the end. This is an 8mm, by the way. I don't remember what the size is for the Allen wrenches. I've had to do it a few times, but not too many times. So once you get that all the way down here, set it down here, I'll show you what we'll do. Alright, now that we've gotten this far, in order to get this out, you've got three options. You have the tie rod end mover, which slides up in here like this, and then you tighten that nut up and it pushes the stud out. You have the pickle fork option, which goes in between here and the control arm, but I don't like this option because it damages the bushings and the oil seals and stuff and allows your grease to go out. But then you have your third option, which is basically the brute force option. That's a big hammer. What you can do is you can hit it right here several times and then hit it on the bottom, and it usually comes right up. Then you can remove your nut. The reason you leave the nut on there portion of the way, you know, at least 3 or 4 threads in here, is because if you slip and hit your threads, you'll be playing heck to get that back on there. So leave the nut on there in order to protect it. You want more than just one thread, because you don't want to damage the threads in here or the threads on here, but usually 3 or 4 threads will protect it good enough even if you tap it a few times. Once you've got to this point, then go ahead and pull it off and set it off to the side. What we're after now is the lower control arm ball joint nut. Let's go over there and I'll show you where it's at. Alright, here we are. This is the lower ball joint right here. That's this thing. This is the spindle assembly or spindle hub assembly, and getting this apart is really a booger. You have a couple options. You have the big pry bar option, you have the big hammer option, and you have the pickle fork option over there. Unfortunately, you don't have like a tie rod end option for these. It just doesn't work. So once you get the nut loose, then you can go at it. Unfortunately, a box end won't get on that, so you'll have to use an open end 18mm wrench. So let's get to it. Now you'll need to set the wrench on there towards the inside, and then you may even have to reconnect the tie rod end over here temporarily, just in order to keep the assembly from moving. Then grab it and give it a good reef, and it should come loose. I've already loosened it once for you guys. Once you get that nut up, you don't have to take it all the way off. Disconnect the tie rod end again, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take our hammer and we're going to smack where the tie rod, or I'm sorry, not the tie rod, but where the lower ball joint stud goes through the spindle assembly. So let's do that real quick. Alright, you don't want to be hitting here. You want to be, or here, you want to be hitting right in here. Let me see if I can get this over here to where you can see. There you go. That's where you want to hit, right here. And do that on both sides. Pull this back towards the back of the car. You have access to the other side to whack. Hit it a little bit harder than that. I'm doing it that way just to show you where to hit. Also, don't forget to put the nut back on here in order to protect the threads for your tie rod end. I smacked it once, but I got lucky and it didn't damage the threads. Now take the spindle or the axle shaft and push it in as far as you can get it. Pull this as far as you can get it out, and then between the nut, the lower ball joint nut, and the CV axle, place this big pry bar in here. I don't remember what the size of the pry bar is, but I bought it at Harbor Freight. I think it's a 3/4 inch bar. Then what you got to do is you got to go ahead and pick up on this and pry that bolt down in order to release your little ball joint from your spindle assembly. You can also take the pry bar and put it between the lower control arm and where the tie rod end comes over here. Right there. And that also makes a good spot. You can also set it right here on top of this, another bar. Doesn't have to be this one with the little hook on the end, and run it up through this direction. Just be careful not to hit your body here or hit your mirror. I folded mine in. So between whacking on both sides of the lower spindle assembly, pry barring, and hitting in all those 3 spots, I was able to let it come loose in about 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes a little longer. They're real boogers sometimes, but if you work at it and keep going, it'll come off. Once you've got it broken free, then you can go ahead and finish taking this nut off down here. It's a long, laborious process, but if you work with it, it'll come off eventually. Well, taking mine off, even though I had already had the nut loose, as I was turning it, the inside stud for the lower ball joint kept moving. So in order to fix it so that it wouldn't move, I went ahead and I put a little tension on it with my jack. Just be careful not to hit the grease fitting right here. Don't damage that. You don't want to put the jack on that. So let me get this the rest of the way off. Success. It's off now. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lower this and separate the spindle assembly from the CV axle. And I'll show that to you. Once you get that nut off, you can use the pry bar underneath the same spot on the tie rod end support over there. Let me go around and show it to you. There. That spot right there, right where the tie rod goes in. Put your hook under that, or your pry bar under that. Then go ahead and pry down and push this away while you're doing it, and it'll come loose. You can also use the spot over here underneath the sway bar drag link, or any other spot over here that you deem is more appropriate for you. After you get it separated, remove the pry bar and grab it, turn it all the way towards the back. And as you get it from the back, you notice you can pull it up like this. You pull far enough with this rod, pull all the, with the CV axle angled like this towards that way, then you can lift out, push out with it, and then pull this CV axle out. So let's go ahead and do that. The reason you want to take the CV axle and pull it out the front is because the drag link will get in the way. So that's why you go to the front. Next, we need to pull the CV axle out of the transmission. One of the things I didn't mention was a drip pan. I used it on the other side, but I didn't have a big problem with the transmission coming out. Probably one of the reasons is I only lifted up one side of the car, and most of the transmission fluid maybe to the other side, or I could be a little low on transmission fluid. Either way, just to make sure, I would throw a rag under there and have a drip pan ready in case you need it. By the way, before we get to that, now is a good time, now that you have this separated, to make sure that this is stiff and not sloppy and bouncy or making any clunking noise. Remember I talked about I didn't like the pickle forks because it damages the bushing? This one got damaged right here. Although I didn't use it this time, I think I used it a long time ago on it, and it still lasted. Also, if you don't have a grease fitting on the bottom like this one, it's a good idea to get a needle grease and then go ahead and grease these up. That's provided that your lower ball joint is in still good shape. I would go ahead and replace this, except that it's part of this, and it was several years ago I had been in here, and it's been fine since. So I'm just going to leave it and call it good. Alright, you see these little notches right here in the CV axle housing on the inside? That's what you need to hit in order to get the CV axle out. If it's over on this side, it's easier because you can put that little pry bar that I was talking about earlier as tools needed, and you can pry it out easier. If not, then you'll have to take your pry bar and stick it up in here like this and catch one of the sides right there and pry it out. It's a little awkward, but you can do it. Also, you can't remove the CV axle by actually pulling on the axle itself, as it's got a slip joint in there on purpose so that as the suspension moves, it will move. So don't even try that. It's not going to work. So let's see if we can't get this axle out of here by prying it out.